Okay, well, it's time once again for another episode of the Kandy Fontaine Show. Yay! Wish I had a little theme music. Ta-da! Jazz hands. And I'm Alex S. Johnson, aka Kandy Fontaine. My previous guests have included Valor Khan from Christian Death, Peaches Christ, Nina Hartley, the adult film pioneer and sex positive feminist. Um, we work with literal rock stars as Nocturnicorn Books. If you want to know specifics, okay, I want to talk about some specifics. Obviously, my guest, my good friend, and contributor, Dr. Jackie Dilworth, uh, is aware of this, but maybe not everybody who tunes into the show is aware of what I mean by rock stars. So you say, well, the guy you went to high school with who had that garage band that almost made it, or whatever. Uh, some of our core authors and people who whose bands opened up for Guns N' Roses, for example, or are in iconic videos like Welcome to the Jungle. I'm talking about Iris Berry. So Iris is like one of the best people I know. As a rock star, literally formed Punk Hostage Press with A Razor, their partner, which is kind of the epithet or the moniker that he earned from his lifestyle of being a convicted, murderer. So, but he turned that around and became a sort of educator and a poet and a great poet. And interestingly enough, Iris and I started our publishing careers the exact same year, which is 2012, right? So I actually performed from the Death Jazz, which is my first collection in 2012 at Coffee Cartel in Redondo Beach, California. And and another one of our core contributors is a woman named Ellen Mabey, whose fans include like, I don't know, Grail Marcus, Viggo Mortensen, Jackson Brown, no big deal, right? So she's a rock star. And we have, okay, so another rock star is, well, um, David J. Haskins. David J. Haskins, for those of you have been slumbering under a velvet draped, coffin all this time, is the songwriter of a little ditty called "If You Guessed Bela Lugosi's Dead, You Would Be Correct." And this is actually how the boy book and the Bauhaus book came about because David J. Haskins, in response to my email asking if he would be interested in contributing to the Burroughs book, um, responded within 2 days and sent me an original poem. And I was like, I need to kind of maybe take advantage of this, burgeoning relationship and ask the guy who founded Bauhaus and Love and Rockets, maybe if he'd like to write some more stuff for us or allow us to publish some of his work. And he was very graciously allowed us to publish the lyrics to The Day That David Bowie Died, which was his hit single. And he's a wonderful guy. He's a playwright, composer, film composer. He does the things. And so, yeah, we have Jarbo is a contributing author. Jarbo, of course, from Swan's legendary icon of avant-garde. We have contributing original work, a guy named Ethan Maroulis from, several bands, Vampire Rodents, Fahrenheit 451, Spawn Ranch, Black Tape for a Blue Girl. So he's been a friend forever. And a woman named Carrie Lee Chrome, who, if you haven't heard of that name per se, you might have heard of a little outfit called the Runaways, and songs like Secrets, California, Paradise, or waiting for the night. And she collaborated obviously with Joan Jett. So and let's see, a couple others that will be here forever if I go on and on about this. So Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright, is a longtime friend of mine and wrote the foreword for Bauhaus' book, wrote the introduction for Burroughs' book, and the last name I'm going to mention, oh, I have to mention John Shirley. He wrote a little movie called, The Crow, and and Caitlin R. Kiernan. And so Caitlin R. Kiernan is a two-time World Fantasy and Bram Stoker Award-winning author who just turned in the introduction to our Clive Barker tribute and said, "Oh, you've been very patient with me." I'm like, "Not at all. You know, you're, you know, you're, you. I mean, Caitlin is staggeringly brilliant, and I've known this woman for since 1994. So our guest today is one of our, multiple contributing authors, Dr. Jackie Dilworth, and I'm going to just access my little thing that I managed to multitask and brought up this Google Doc. Here we go. Now I'm going to sort of shift shift this down a way so I can read it. Dr. Jacqueline Dilworth is a poet, writer, educator, producer, and DJ, and she is what she plays. I am Dr. Dilworth and you're not is the doctor's stolen catchphrase. And people who are, of our generation will recognize that as Chevy Chase from SNL. Dr. Dilworth writes novels, poetry, plays, as well as translates works from French into English, like the Oracles of Nostradamus or Charles Baudelaire's Bad Flowers, also known as Les Fleurs du Mal. She's also the incumbent mayor of Nada Dada, an art movement that started in Reno, Nevada, and has coordinated that art event since 2018. So we need to talk about that. She's also done her own art shows and performances since 2010 in many venues. The Doctor creates and produces two weekly radio shows, The Jackalope Hour, an eclectic mix of music, poetry, spoken word, and more from across the universe. Jaya Guru Deva, and Dark Party, a 2-hour mix of the finest old, new, and undead dark wave known to humanity that you can dance to. Jazz hands. The shows can be heard weekly on terrestrial and online stations like Radio Goldfield, Rise MF 913, Signal to Noise Radio, KWNK, Tracklight Radio, Pirate Cat Radio on Mixcloud. That sounds intriguing. And as a podcast on many services. You can find Dr. Jacqueline Dilworth online at www.darkparty, that's dark party with a QUE, not K, party.com, on Instagram as SEJDB and on Mixcloud as J Dilworth. So welcome, Dr. Jacqueline Dilworth, once again.
Oh, hello.
Hello. So we have so much to talk about. Now, I think the most obvious thing is that we're both doing Baudelaire translations, and I'd like to ask you, um, Jackie, what was your first exposure to Charles Baudelaire?
My first exposure to Baudelaire comes from the new editions, from the New Dimensions translation of it from the 1950s that was found during the 1950s and the beat, and a lot of people read the New Directions translation,
New
and
Directions,
and
yeah.
there, yeah, New Directions, and the way that they did that translation was interesting, in that they had the original, and they also had uh, a selection. They had various different translations of it instead of just one, because I honestly think that most translations from French, especially of certain authors, are kind of dull and not very well done, especially Baudelaire, because he's one of the first modern writers and poets in maybe any just about any language. So. he, to translate him in a Victorian way kind of hides what he's doing, but he sort of is, modern and contemporary all at once.
Yeah,
Although he has all kinds of problems, I'm not going to say he doesn't. He's been a friend of mine for a long time.
yeah.
I've been working on this translation for about 10 years off and on
Oh my
because
gosh.
I'm going to translate all of it. I'm about I would say about maybe about 40% through because I finished all of Spleen and Ideal, and I'm starting to
Nice,
work
nice.
through the rest of all of it. And my intention is to translate all of it and then do something with it because that's what I do. But I translate him because I didn't like most of the translations I read, and I feel
Yeah.
that it does him a misservice for his words and his thoughts.
Yeah, and it'll be wonderful, if we have, our translations come out simultaneously. As I always recommend to people is, to look at multiple translations and any great writer like Baudelaire, Verlaine, Rimbaud, or even like translating from English into other languages, because I've been translated into like Greek and Chinese, for example. You know, that great writing expands the capacity of both the original language and the translation language. You mentioned very interesting comment about Victorian era, and it's kind of hiding the Victorian translations of Baudelaire kind of hid the original intent. And I think it was
Absolutely.
it was like what T.S. Eliot who really kind of put Baudelaire on the map and kind of confirmed that Baudelaire was the greatest poet of modernity. So, what do you think in Baudelaire speaks to both his time, which was the time of the decadence, the symbolists, symbolists. You had um, numerous great writers like Victor Hugo, right, writing at the time, Les Miserables. You had composers and all sorts of kind of, and it really almost defined Bohemia, right? Like the musical Rent, which is based on what on that the opera, right? The
La Boheme.
La Boheme, yeah, La Boheme and Rent are the same story,
Yes, they
and
are.
and and that is based on Baudelaire, and so they almost created the kind of the myth of the tortured artist, and they were the original Goths, right? So what do you think that the how are you addressing the kind of the hidden dimensions of Baudelaire that the Victorian era translators didn't?
Well, I'm not necessarily trying to keep the forms of the poems because
Right.
I feel that trying to keep the exact rhyme and rhythm structure, it kind of is part of why you're hiding it. Although
Mhm.
sometimes you can use very similar words in English to
Yeah.
Baudelaire that in his word choice. In French, you can use the same words very often because French and English has such similar vocabulary.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for, at least with the way I translate things, if you're looking for something that's like rhythmically accurate and similar, like an Alexander Pope translation of, say,
Right.
how he did the Iliad and the Odyssey, and he
Eh,
did this insane thing
Yeah.
uh, where he was trying to match the original Greek that Homer wrote, supposedly. So he wrote it in English in this 12, 12 syllable kind of madness, and you're just adding a new complexity to something that isn't complex. And
Yeah.
that really started definitely with Alexander Pope in the 18th century and the
Yeah.
classicists, and it just continued, especially with people, the translations like the Thousand and One Nights by Richard Burton. A lot of his translations, he just put the nasty stuff into Latin. Uh, well, so that's why I
Yeah.
know a little Latin. I had to learn some to be able to read
Yeah.
that
Well,
until
also the you have the Carmina Burana, which is fucking filthy, right? That's,
Yeah,
that's in Latin, and it's most people know it as like, Excalibur, or whenever, and it's sort of like a epic Arthurian legends, and it's like
sure.
it sounds very majestic and epic, but it's like fucking filthy, man.
Well, sure, sure. It's just, but it's more about, but something that's fucking filthy isn't necessarily filthy. It's all in the eye of the beholder, and
Of
it's
course.
talking about mm, what to get back to your question. What is it that is so modern and so up to date? Why is Baudelaire up to date and still relevant today?
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
feel that a lot of his stuff is about daily life and about things that you see,
yeah.
and is very dirty, because air quotes dirty
Right.
is those are the things that you don't want to talk about. You're not supposed to put into art and put into poetry and music, because that's not what you want to glorify. You don't want to talk about how it is to be alive and what it feels and all that. So
Yeah.
I think that the dirty and all that is what is being genuine, and a lot of people go to that and like the real, because right now so much is unreal, so much is just just not real and not possible, because of so much. There's just
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah,
So
there is a lot of unreality, which makes me think of, Elliot and Unreal City, right? Not a lot has changed. Certainly, I almost, I think of, The Wasteland as almost like a cut up. I mean, it's really, you've got little patches of Dante, you've got little patches of, just kind of snippets of that was a German Countess or something. You've got I don't, it's just, to me, it's one of the most fascinating, you know, works of English literature. And it's a lot of it is not even is basically, it's a cut up, and it sort of explores that kind of dimension of modernity, which is very fractured and very almost psychotic. And I think that you know, Eliot was attracted to Baudelaire because nobody else was talking about like things like death in a very realistic way, that wasn't sentimental or or kind of the Victorian. That's another subject we could get into. I mean, the Victorian, like simultaneously obsessed with death and trying to make and fetishizing death and really, um, and also kind of trying to and they obsession, fetishism, and also denial at the same time, which is where you had somebody like Baudelaire coming in. Well, I mean, you have precedents, right? Verlaine, for example, was up. Actually, he was later, but I'm thinking of Francois Villon, you know, and
sure,
people like that. And then, if you really want to go back, um, somebody like Petronius Arbiter, or I'm trying to think Catullus, and some of these poets were really hilarious too.
sure, sure. But the thing is this. I don't really think that T.S. Eliot is modern, and I mean he's modern, but he's not. But I've never liked him. I've never liked his stuff.
That's fair.
There's a lot of stuff that I don't like about him, and I think he's kind of overwrought, and he really likes his stuff more than he likes people to make their own ideas and opinions about it. That's kind of so how it's always treated me, and I really don't like cats. I don't like cats.
That's fair enough.
That's
And
awful. Mr.
this
Possum.
this
Whatever it is.
right.
Never liked it.
It's like well, that's why I love having you on. I love your contributions because I don't want ass kissers. I don't want people who are like, oh, what's Alex up to? What is Alex like? I want people to say, the Beatles are overrated or whatever. We're going to get
They
into
are.
that. We're going to
They
get into
absolutely
that.
are. Sure.
I just like, you know, if it's has substance at all, you're certainly not going to cancel the Beatles. But what you are going to do is kind of like give a new critical lens about aspects of culture, and it really
Yeah.
reads back into culture, what we value, what we think is cool, what we idolize. And anyway, blah blah blah. So
Well,
yeah,
sure. What you think is important, because for a lot of people, things like the Beatles and T.S. Eliot and all that is important. But I think for increasingly more people, a lot of things that are considered the classics of music and literature and whatever are going to become less and less so, because things are, time is passing and new things are coming up and old things are going away. But some of the old things that were totally overlooked in the past are starting to come back even more so and more strongly, because at the time people were throwing around, Robert Frost and T.S. Eliot, and
yeah,
they're not talking about you know Jack Kerouac or Diane DeCorso, or
right,
there's people who are writing in that kind of milieu,
yeah,
and just never got the recognition. They didn't get they weren't writing. They weren't writing back in 1902. They didn't start Poetry Magazine in 1899 and start sending things out and
right,
such. I mean, it feels like a lot of what is just this built up a crustation of what people decided was good, and they just never critically look at it. So I guess that's
yeah,
kind of where I'm coming at it from, because there's a whole lot of reevaluation we need to do about everything, and I
yeah,
think that has to be done so we can move forward and start and restart doing new stuff, because a lot of what's happening, and it's even more obvious with AI and just what it's spitting
hmm,
out. I
yeah,
mean, it is a cut up machine, but what do you get when you put into a cut up machine and you put in the same old shit? You get worse shit. It's all just
yeah,
derivative. It's
yeah,
just a fancy cut up machine. That's what LLM is. So,
yeah. I
so
mean,
there you go.
I mean, there was literally a saying or an acronym back in the 50s, garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah,
GIGO, right?
yeah.
And so much has not changed, especially with like Instagram poets. And I'm gonna name some names. There's a guy, he's just like one of the worst poets I've ever read in my life. Jeff Oliver. Look up Jeff Oliver. And this
Uh,
guy, all that's even known about him is that he has 8 children, right?
Eight
He
children.
he was pu published
What does he
originally.
do?
What does he do? Does he like Groucho
Does he
Marx?
live in a shoe?
Well, yeah, but Groucho Marx back on the old like what it was his program. Now I'm starting to sound like you, but back on Groucho Marx, of course, he had his program, right?
Yes, he did. You bet
And
your life.
You Bet Your Life, exactly. And so he had this guy on the show, and he said, "Oh, how many? I'm a father of 12 or so. What do you? And you say you run you run a screwing machine, like that. But so this guy, his poetry and
What's this dude's name again? Say
um,
say again.
Jeff Oliver. So you can find a lot of his stuff. He also has a Facebook account where he posts like about 12 poems a day. I'm not even making this up. And
Mm,
he's published in places like the Horror Zine, and he was even
mm,
published, believe
mm,
it or not, I used to work with Stephen Mark Rainey uh,
mm-hmm,
at Death Row magazine. And I actually, in our dark, this is one of our recent anthologies. And I just want to
mm-hmm.
give a shout out to Nicole Six. And So I just went for the people. This is
Now
Dirt.
it's your turn to grab something you've dropped.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. It's a
Mm,
literary tribute to revenge. Um, I don't know why I didn't ask you, but yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of stuff going on. But it contains, original work, exclusive work by people like David Nell Wilson, who's multiple Bram Stoker award-winning author and former president of HWA, and Stephen Mark Rainey himself. And anyway, so it's sort of like he has lines like "I am fucking crazy," or it's less than not poetry. It's sort of just saying things like "I'm crazy," "I'm really fucking depressed," I'm dark," "I'm angry," "I'm disturbed." aren't you afraid of me? Like, I'm gonna say something really violent now. I just said it. Oh my God. You know, but it's also very kind of weirdly, oddly defensive and self-pitying as well. And I was actually, I have to admit, I have a very bad habit of like, I will troll people by pretending to admire them. And even sort of, I did these kind of like, sort of literary analyses of his work as though I were taking it seriously. And I would sort of, deconstruct them and say, oh, yeah, and quote him, warmly and accurately. And say this line about the trees are bleeding into my soul or something like that. Um, was that a reference to such and such, And he soon picked up on the fact that I was trolling him. He did not like that at all. And I'm sorry, but like don't think people are trained the way we were trained. I was a college professor. So I'm trained in reading, like closely. Um, but I think I'm always shocked and a little, surprised that so many editors and publishers in speculative fiction, this like I wonder, I'm not talking about like Ellen Datlow, I'm talking about but people who publish things that are just objectively bad, and you think you can say that. I know that's a controversial thing to say about literature, but you can. There are certain objective criteria that distinguish Sylvia Plath from. You may not like Sylvia Plath either, but
I love her. She's beautiful.
okay, okay, but from
She's real.
Sylvia,
I like the real.
yeah. So
She's real.
Sylvia Plath from, I don't know, your aunt who dabbles in poetry. There's
Neither of mine did or have, although
right.
one can go perform during the bridge club at her home. So we'll just say that.
Yes,
Anyway,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's poetry is one of the things, or being a writer is one of the things where everybody like I think because everybody writes that,
no, they don't.
well,
They
well,
don't write
no, no, no,
necessarily,
no.
but
Well, I'm just bear with me because,
sure.
my point is that like people don't take professional writers seriously. They certainly don't pay them, because
No,
because you wrote something like in grammar school that your teacher loved and you read it before the class or the school assembly, right? You got your poem in the high school newspaper, you were awarded some special prize, blah, blah, blah. And so then you think, I've done the work, or at any rate, you've been sort of you've been endorsed or I'm trying to think of the word. Help me out, Jackie. You've been sort of validated that and that's good enough, right? So if people, especially in the internet culture, in the Reddit mobs or whatever, they'll try to cancel somebody who's Angela Carter. And I was part of this actually it was kind of a fun group called are you familiar with Men Writing Women?
no.
So on Reddit, it's a waste of time. Reddit is a total waste of time. But it was kind of fun because you had people, and it was a lot of people trying to just like, do gotcha with classic writers. And somebody thought had seen what they would do is they'd see a fragment or a snippet or something, out of context of some author, and then they would victoriously post it on Men Writing Women subreddit and say, "Oh, this is really vile child porn or something. Look at what they said about this 12-year-old girl." And it's a quote from the book about this man said about, this 12-year-old girl. And it's like, and then I say, excuse me, but that is a quotation from The Company of Wolves by Angela Carter and or the bloody was it the bloody chamber, I think. Yeah, the
The
bloody
Bloody
chamber.
Chambers are in
Yeah,
the novel. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And they sort of, what are you going to say? And I was like, So that's literally a woman. And
Yeah.
it's not creepy because she's talking about her own experience. And it's fiction and it's a fable. And what you gonna do? But there's a lot of like this sort of politically motivated sort of, the desire, the primary motive is very disingenuous because it has not anything to do. I mean, some of these writers, you know, like it's what makes them great is they talk about things that are, you know, like David Cronenberg says, the imagination is not politically correct. Where,
Well, no, it isn't.
we're not talking, when we like I happen to love Charles Bukowski, your mileage may differ, but I think Bukowski is saying what everybody thinks about and talks about, and he can even make poetry out of, just had a good beer shit, and they're like, right? You
Well, I
know,
mean, but that's reductive, you know. I feel
okay,
Bukowski is very reductive because
okay,
all
that's
he's
fair.
doing ultimately, I mean, he's writing about. I like his poetry. In fact, there's a couple of poems of his I like. Or what I like, one of his I like is where he's listening to the radio broadcast of the symphony because he loved classical music and he was very much into it. And next door, he's hearing someone yelling, and there's someone beating someone else up, and
Yeah,
someone having
right.
sex somewhere, and
Yeah,
he's living his life and all that. I mean, his poetry before he got famous and found and people wanted to go hang out and drink a beer with him is a lot more interesting, a lot more real than his other stuff. But how much do you need of it? I mean, it became an act. It became his act and kind of his thing. Like, a lot of it looks like a lot of people on the internet. I have an act. This is my act. This is my act. I'm a poet, and I put
right.
up 10,000 poems a day, and has nothing to do with actual poetry because people don't read anymore and people don't listen and people aren't. And I say people just in general, that people aren't
Yeah.
listening and reading
Well, okay,
and
okay.
understanding.
I'm gonna have to slow you down there, Doctor, because you're making like wild generalizations. When you
Sure.
say people, I
Yeah.
mean our friends, our colleagues, our people like Anna Taborska
Sure.
and Caitlin R. Kiernan. So when you say
Sure.
people, you got to be more specific. And also, what does this people group represent? This is a sort of a stand, it's like a straw man, is
The
they're
the
saying
general public,
the general public, the hoi polloi, right? The hoi
the
polloi.
hoi polloi, if you
They
want to,
just
you know.
Okay, what's some receipts like the hoi polloi? They voted for Trump. Well, that's one thing. The hoi polloi don't understand that Greenland is not a you know buy. I mean, you can't buy it. It's a sovereign
Well,
country. Things like that.
so if you look at what people think is poetry, and if you're looking and seeing what people, and I maybe I'm being very broadly vague with this, but you look at where people are. You look at Instagram, you look at TikTok, you look at Facebook. More TikTok and Instagram now, but people they're reading poetry, and it's more like slam poetry. It's more like something that's a haiku, but they don't know the form. But it's a matter of that people aren't these people who are doing this, they're doing things because it's their expression and they're creating something. They don't realize, or they've never been given access to more, maybe literature or poetry or the academy or whatever. But people are going to use words and create things and make things how they're going to make them. And this dude who's writing these poems who gets, the gentleman you mentioned, I looked at his stuff, bully for him. He has like 12 followers, and every time he posts something, he has got 12 followers. Hooray.
Yeah,
What can
that's
you
great.
say?
What can
Good
you
for
say?
him.
Yeah, right.
And ultimately, that's what you mostly can say about it. Because what can you say? People, you can't argue with people's taste. And if they don't know what a polydactyl Alexandrine sonnet is, if you write
Yeah,
it, they're not necessarily going to understand it unless there's
yeah,
something in it.
right.
And and if you use a form it has you can write sonnets, you can write ballads, you can do all kinds of stuff using traditional forms. But if you're writing about something that someone who's a Trump voter is going to understand, then they'll at least be able to hear it. Just a lot of things in rarefied spaces of highly educated and very well read people aren't passing over to where people are, because it's just people are living in totally different worlds and universes in their bubbles of information and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, you know.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I always like I love to hear you speak because, it's not, I mean, it's not like I'm not paying attention to the content, but I always like, you know, it's not just your accent, which I want to talk about that, but
Sure.
it's also your delivery style is very theatrical and it's very reminiscent of 1930s movies, and which I absolutely adore. I
Sure.
love like, you know, Cary Grant,
I
Clark
met him once.
Gable. Oh my gosh, you
It
did.
was totally accidental. I happened to where I grew up mostly was Reno,
Mhm.
Nevada, and the school I went to when I was in elementary school. I'm probably giving. I can never use this question again for my bank. The elementary school I went to was called Veterans. It was Veterans Memorial, and it's a couple blocks away from the VA hospital in Reno. And it happened that Cary Grant was doing a tour in the US. This was 1986,
Oh
and
wow.
he was touring and he was making appearances and he was doing shows. Like he did a show at the Pioneer Theater. That's the opera house in downtown Reno. It's a modernist. It's weird because the juxtaposition of life and things is, it's a geodesic dome, a golden geodesic dome that was built in 1962 because they were trying to get the business, the convention business, and it's funny to think that. So basically, he was doing a show there, and he went to the Veterans Hospital, and he noticed there was an elementary school there, and he asked the principal at the time if he could do a presentation there. So basically, he did two assemblies. He did two shows for everyone at the school. So they set up things like they played some clips from Arsenic and Olace and some other things, and then he started talking about them and explained them. And he was funny and genuine and interesting and real. And afterwards, I just went up to him and shook his hand. And not too late and too much later. I mean, I think it was in 1986 that he passed. I can look exactly,
Yeah.
but this was very near to the end of Cary Grant, and I don't know that he noticed my accent because I just said thank you and said all that.
Right.
But my accent comes from the fact that I had many speech impediments because of the way I talked. So I had a lot of speech therapy. And in doing that speech therapy, I was taught by someone who had learned in the 1950s from someone who had learned from someone else. So Mrs. Lee was her name. I don't remember her first name. Mrs. Lee was a very specific lady, and she had me say a bunch of, you know, it's funny because a lot of the tongue twisters and things are all the same ones and from My Fair Lady. She had
Wow.
me use those.
Oh
So,
my gosh. Yeah.
and Hartford,
The
Hereford, and Hampshire,
the
Harrigan's hardly happy.
the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain, and
Well,
yes.
yeah, not that one, but it's similar kinds of things.
Not that one, but yes.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
so I was if I'm totally up to my faculties, I usually talk in this sort of voice. It isn't an affectation. I'm
No, I
not
know
from
it. I
Canada
know
or
it's not.
Ireland.
I know it's not.
Uh, well, some people don't, and it's gotten me laid and got me in some interesting situations in the past.
Nice.
But I try not. It isn't. It was deception. It was. I try not to lie. I try to be upfront and honest with people. So I decided that a long time ago. I decided to be kind, and decided to tell the truth as
Yeah.
much as I can. So so
It,
yeah.
it's very charming.
Well, it's something anyway.
It's something. Yeah. So I want to talk about something else because, which
Sure.
is adjacent and we're both kind of performers and also I want to talk about like queer lineage. I think I never really thought about it too much, growing up, but like I was always drawn to performers or actors like Betty Davis
Yeah.
or Vincent Price. I had no
Hmm.
idea, whatever that there were. My friend Trisha Warden calls it alphabet. I like that alphabet, and
Mm.
because I think of alphabet soup, right? But I loved movies like All About Eve, Sunset Boulevard, and I adored watching Cassandra Peterson and Elvira on the
Sure.
whatever the Elvira's show, and I had no idea that a lot of these a lot of these actors, a lot of these performers were queer, and
Oh,
and
sure.
and and
There are
and
signs.
and then the whole thing about I'm really fascinated by queer coded villains, so like you know
Sure.
what I mean, and I urge you to watch All About Evil, Peaches Christ, because it is one of the best kind of it's camp, but it totally plays it straight
Yeah.
as it were, and it stars Natasha Lyonne, who puts in like a genre-defining performance. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant movie. And so, learning now you can watch and now you can watch videos and YouTube, and the like. But back in the day, I was just like, I didn't know that there was a whole like kind of that there were I mean, I love like Liza Minnelli. I didn't realize what that might have implied. I adored Betty Davis. I was sort of like I wanted to be Betty Davis in All About Eve and say, you know, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. Because I thought that's the coolest thing I ever heard in my life. I didn't realize what that might have entailed. Because I just thought I naturally gravitated toward it, and coming to terms with my identity, I just realized it's natural, it's normal. Like people, and one of the worst things about the Trump, I shouldn't even use his name, is really giving him oxygen, but the orange object, whatever, sludge, is that, trying to like weaponize people's own for us, it's normal, right? We're femmes. It's normal, and it feels beautiful, the more you recognize that your honesty about yourself, the more beautiful and yeah, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as gender euphoria, that people
Mm.
talk about gender dysphoria and sort of like, yes, well, there's also this feeling of like, fuck yeah, like when my friends like Trisha Warden say, call me lady, I'm like, that feels really good. And when
Yeah.
Peaches
Yeah.
Christ called me Candy, I'm like, God bless you.
I can totally dig that. Yeah, I do get
Yeah,
that.
it's so amazing. So yeah, so I think also, people are like the skinny puppy had an album called The Greater Wrong of the Right, and I always think like, well, what they get wrong is trying to make people afraid of just like drag queens. The drag queens you really want to have drag queens in your corner. If you're in a fight, some of the most dedicated fighters are going to be some drag queens, man. Like, and I found I understood, or I believe that I understand what magnetizes me to some of my friends. Like, I've known Iris Berry for, you know, over a decade and performed with her. And I didn't realize or understand that she and Pleasant Gaiman were a couple. I mean, they even literally say that, they're sort of like a common law couple, or that they had also, kind of been, you know, sort of the environment that accepted them was, like Latin drag queens,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
it's just really, really beautiful. And I talked to, actually talked, I had a phone call with Pleasant. It's just really incredible human. I mean, she founded Lobotomy Zine. I'm sure you know this, because we're part of the same lineage. In when she was 17 years old, and she had, some of her writers included, Joan Jett, right?
Hmm.
And Joan Jett, and then when Joan toured with the Runaways, you know, then she uh, she I guess gave a young Sid Vicious her belt, and then the Sex Pistols formed, and Lemmy taught Sid Vicious how to play bass. Everything is interconnected. It's another thing. Is some of my friends, I won't say who they are, but are like really like, oh well, I hate Lemmy, but I love whatever, or I love Bowie. Or it's like, I mean, you realize that Peter Hook of Joy Division and New Order got his bass tone from Lemmy. It's like
Hmm.
Lemmy was a friend of Bowie's and the Beatles
Sure.
too. So it's
Yeah,
like,
he was.
yeah, I mean,
He was.
there's, and when you look at all of these kind of, Bibby Hansen calls it the Venn diagrams of it, you see there's a very specific linkage and lineage that connects. So that's what I want to talk about. So, David Bowie was inspired. He and Iggy Pop were inspired by Christopher Isherwood, who wrote the Berlin Diaries, which inspired Cabaret.
Hmm.
And
I am a
then
camera.
I Am a Camera, exactly, exactly. And then you had so James O'Barr, who wrote the original, created The Crow, was
Yes, he did.
inspired by Joy Division, Bauhaus, David Bowie, Iggy Pop, and The Cure. And he was in Berlin at the same time that Bowie was, in 1978, specifically. The look of The Crow, the character, was inspired by Peter Murphy.
Yes,
It
that
was
makes sense.
it's supposed to be so. Then you have John Shirley, who's also a songwriter with Blue Oyster Cult, wrote the original screenplay of The Crow, and that had music by, you know, Nine Inch Nails, which is, Trent's cover of Dead Souls by Joy Division, which was, and also I identified like do you ever play this game where you listen to a song and you say, wait, this song is actually that song. So there's the song Atmosphere by Joy Division, which is actually Cat People, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. Sure, sure. It's a similar.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's identical. Like the first 8 bars are Cat People. And then I was listening to this song. This is really fun. So the Go-Go's, who were friends of Pleasant and Iris, specifically they lived with Belinda Carlisle and Jane Weedland. They had a song called "Surfing and Spying," and it's the song, the Christian Death song, um, "Skeleton Kiss" from the Iron Mask album.
Hmm.
And I actually interviewed Roz, rest in peace. I also had Valor Candid, who's very controversial, but that's another story.
Yeah,
But,
it is.
so, it's the same song. Do 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 do, because it's surf music.
Sure, it's similar. Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. You're the Yeah. Um, and if you want to, keep track of the time we have, like, well, we've done about an hour. So if you want to wrap things up, or you want to give your, how people can get into, it's entirely up to you, Jackie. I mean, I'm flexible. So
Oh,
whatever
sure, sure,
you
sure. I
want to talk
have to
about.
record my. Sure, I have to record my next Jackalope Hour, and I
Okay.
have a show that's kind of cool tonight. What I'm doing, I'm have a band live in studio, so I have to get there a little early, so I'm gonna have to do a
Okay.
couple things. But
Okay.
I'll say this, there's a lot to talk about, and
Yeah.
I have controversial opinions. I disagree with about half of what you think. I'll just say that much.
Well, that's great. I mean,
Well,
I
I mean,
I I encourage that.
well, I'll just say this. I mean, very briefly, I don't like Valor Cand, and I don't like his. I think he's overwrought, and what he did to Roz was kind of underhanded. But Roz
I mean,
was a glorious man.
I got to tell you, I was there,
Oh,
so you can disagree with me all you
okay,
want, but
sure.
I literally had lunch with Jatan Damone.
Hmm.
I've been covering this. I collaborated with the Blue Blood magazine people.
Oh,
I
sure.
was
I
in
know
Dark
that. That's
Angel
true.
magazine, right?
Yeah, you were.
So I mean, people can go back and say, I hope this doesn't sound offensive, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of misunderstanding and misinformation, including about the truth is extremely complex. And there
Oh,
were,
sure it is. I'm sure.
and on both sides, there was some shenanigans.
Oh,
Both,
I'm certain of it. Sure,
and Valor is uh, a really smart guy. I mean, he's really
sure,
smart. Like but I approach it as a journalist.
sure.
And I say,
Absolutely.
I've had the opportunity to have exclusive 3 hour conversation with Fowler Cand. I'm not going to say, I had like this happened. I know I'll let you go, but this happened very early in my journalism career. When I actually had the opportunity to interview Craig Spector
Oh, yeah, sure,
of Skip and Spector, obviously, right after the infamous breakup. And this is the only time I'm the first and only journalist that he's ever talked to, I believe, about the breakup.
oh,
And I also had John Skip in my life as, just socially. So I would see Skip a lot because
yeah,
he would come to a friend of mine, a mutual friend who was also friends with Edward Lee. And so, and I'd say, hey, John, smoke weed or whatever. And we even made a little kind of a video movie together, which is
yeah,
very fun. But the point is that okay, so Craig is a blunt guy, and
sure.
the fact that I interviewed him doesn't mean that I endorse him.
No,
I just like, but there was a whole thread long, long before social media, when you had like AOL chat or whatever, where
oh, yeah,
people
sure,
like kicking the shit out of me because he said some not very nice things about Skip, and it was sort of like,
yeah.
but it's always the critics, and I don't mean you, Jackie. I mean,
Oh, sure,
like,
sure.
I love you. I mean, I'm always saying that the critics, the nitpickers, they're so hypocritical because
They definitely are.
if they have the opportunities I had, they would jump on it. They would
Oh, of
jump
course
on
they
it.
would.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, of
hey, this is Craig Spector. I'm going to give you an exclusive interview. Oh no, I
course.
can't have that, right? Hey, I got an exclusive interview with Poppy Bright. Oh, well, Poppy is immoral and writes, terrible things. You shouldn't talk
The,
to Poppy. That's all
he's one of my favorite writers.
exactly, right?
I've always wanted to talk to him and just thank him, but I know, I know, yeah,
Yeah.
that there's a new edition of that coming out. I understand,
Whoops. Yeah.
and you
Um,
dropped the old edition, so you
I,
obviously have to get a new one.
that's it. There we go. There we
There
go.
it is.
So yes. So I've always approached this as a journalist, and I sort of make it my job to no matter. I mean, I've actually interviewed people like, Varg Vikernes from Burzum, and I flew to
Burzum. Yeah.
Oslo, right? And I interviewed, the band Emperor. It's extremely controversial. I mean, one of
Oh,
their
sure.
members literally committed murder. And so like I don't know that there's a lot of just sheer hypocrisy, with people who are just like would be like dying to be in my shoes and to interview Diamanda Gallis, but they would, but of course, the I think it's sometimes it's sort of like like narcissistic wounding, when it's like
Hmm.
you dismiss somebody, and I've had somebody. so many like murder threats and death threats and literal razor blades sent to me. And
Oh,
sort of like, why are you doing this to me? Are you maybe like a little butthurt that you didn't have the opportunities I did? Well, I worked my ass off to get these into
yes, you did.
put
I know.
myself in a position where I would, I could reach out to Jarbo once
Yeah,
again, and
yeah.
say, "Hi, Jarbo, I would love to have you as a contributor." And Jarbo says, "Yes." Like how many people, even in our orbit, how many people in the dark fiction world have Jarbo and David J as their
I
contributors?
can't think of any.
Nobody. So it's like, yeah, I do get a little defensive and people
Oh, I
slam me,
understand.
but it's like y- in order to be like in my position, I created this job
You did.
because I was gate kept out of every other, organization, HWA, SIFWA, the Brown Stoker Awards, the Nebula Awards, everything. Nobody would allow me in. I've never been on a long list for the Brown Stoker Awards, etc. But I have
Yeah.
people like Mort Castle, who's a fan of mine. Anna Tambor is a fan of mine, and
Oh,
John
sure.
Shirley is a fan of mine. And like,
Yeah,
are you all just jealous? Are you haters because you're butthurt, because you're bitter? Because, it's a job. We do a
it
job.
is.
And if you do a job like if it was another job, people would sort of expect that you would be awarded for doing it well.
I can
I'm
appreciate that.
right. There's always haters. So
There
anyway, I
always
didn't
is.
I didn't mean to leave it off on a. So I don't see you as a hater.
Oh, I'm not at all. No, no, no. I just have definite opinions, and I think what I think. And I mean, I understand. Valor Candace continued to tour as Christian Death,
Yeah,
and he's made more music. It's just not to my taste, and
that's
I'm not
great.
knocking him.
Yeah,
It's just not
that's
what I like,
that's
and
yeah.
there it is. And
But I think it's healthy, and I think it's. I'm starting to sound like you again. I think it's healthy, and I think it's wonderful that I'm going to
sure.
publish your very sort of contrarian perspective on the Beatles
Yes,
in it, right in an anthology that
yeah,
includes it includes everybody. Now, I
it
mean,
sure does. It seems
they
it, doesn't
usually
it?
do, right? They usually do. Anna Taborska, multiple Bram Stoker award-winning author, World Fantasy finalist, Riesling Award finalist,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Jeffrey Thomas, the creator of Punktown, et al. And I
Hmm.
love them all so much.
Absolutely.
Pickles, and you, my friends. So
Yeah.
any information you want to share
Oh,
with
of course.
my viewers and what you're doing with the dark wave and your upcoming shows and things that you're recording today and how to contact you on social media and forthcoming stuff, forthcoming content.
Oh, sure, sure. So in fact, I was just doing like a final kind of run through and draft of my things on the Stones because I thought it was interesting, because I called it Your Beatles and Your Stones, but of course, uh, I that's a misquotation. That's a
Yeah.
misquotation of of the whole. Hang on, I'm trying to get to the right. Window because there's lots of windows. It's a misquotation. It's a misunderstanding of the lyrics, and
Yeah.
it just feels like, for me at least, that the Beatles have always been at a remove, but they're always spoken of so grandly and grandiosely. But there is good music, and they are good. Except I think people have done some of their stuff better. Like Susie and the Banshees cover of Dear Prudence is one of the best covers, period, of any song, and I think it improves on the Beatles song. Um, the idea is to pick up something and you do something more with it. You don't recreate it for eternity. I mean, you know, that's sort of what it is. I feel that we're kind of in a funk as a culture, as a world, as a universe, because we're trying to recreate whatever it is. And with AI, we're going to do a new Beatles album. After all, there's going to be new biopics next year in the next couple of years of all four Beatles by Sam Mendes, and we're gonna we're gonna just create a new album. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make a movie with them. We're gonna. It's all AI, but there's
That's
nothing to it. You know,
that's horrifying. But
it is.
I think there's one thing I would just want to say to that, and
Sure.
this was like last year, and I approached Kiernan because I said, well, you and Billy Martin published with Subterranean Press, and I would,
Mm.
I mean, you know, I publish you and Billy, and
Yeah.
I don't see why, Billy, you and Billy have been friends of mine for decades, and
Yes.
I would love to be published by Subterranean, and Caitlin wrote me this beautifully long, um, very thoughtful
Hmm.
no. And she
Yes.
said, okay, this is his address, the Subterranean Press guy. She said, honestly, I don't think he would even get your Baudelaire of our time blurb from Shirley. I don't think he would understand it. And then she gave me specifically a a a piece of advice, which I later
Hmm.
identified as William Burroughs to Patti Smith.
Yes.
William Burroughs said, build a good name. Caitlin
Yes.
said, build your name.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
thought, well, so Caitlin is saying make Nocturnicorn books something that's new.
Yes.
Subterranean already exists. It's and you know, Caitlin loves Subterranean. Present, they certainly are a classic, like boutique imprint.
Yes. They are.
But sort of like making me feel, hey, you know what? You always think like the other day I was like, Caitlin sent out their to their Patreon or Substack, readers like, did you see that about the new Ellen Datlow and anthology? And I said, and I was thinking, I sent Ellen Datlow 10 books and I'd be lucky to get an honorable mention. And then I realized, hey, guess what, dude? You know, like Caitlin R. Kiernan is one of your core contributors and best friends. What the fuck are you, like whining about? You should be just like celebrating the fact that you get to do this as a career. It's
Yeah.
like who gets to do that? Like, so I was like,
Not too many people.
shut up, man. Just, you know, okay, suck it up. You're doing well. We got we have such sights to show you. By the way,
Indeed.
Clive Barker, did you send me something for Clive Barker?
No, I've never. I mean, Clive Barker, I know from Hellraiser, but I never really got into his writing. I mean,
I
I
knew it.
appreciate it.
I knew it. I
I
mean,
just
you
never got
got
into him.
so that's why we always have to have like the contrarian corner. I mean, I'll give you like your own corner of every
Okay.
anthology if you want. So sort of like and a dissident viewpoint from
Oh,
Dr.
sure.
Jackie Dilworth. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, like for example, like for the forthcoming Black Diadem, Summerween issue, maybe you could
Hmm.
have a column where you just sound off on stuff, right?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm not going to say. I mean, I'll say this. I'm not going to say no to that. I would say yes,
Okay.
but I come at it sort of. One of my favorites is Harlan Ellison, and
Me
that's kind of
too.
where it comes out. And
Me
I've
too.
always agreed with him a lot. Sure.
Me too. Yeah,
Sure.
he was the only guy, it was the last guy who who talked about things in an honest, forthright,
Yeah.
real way, and he would support people whose work had been minimized. He always talked up the people who had been overlooked in the lineage, the older writers who were just
Yeah.
not recognized. And if there's any shenanigans in organizations, he'd be right there. I mean, they called him the mouse that roared. I remember
Yes.
like being at the Stoker Awards in Las Vegas in 1992, and the guest of
Hmm.
honor was none other than Richard Matheson.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And I remembered that there was this kind of firestorm. You hear this like he was this was right before Richard was speaking, and you hear this shouting, this all this, you know, clamor, and you look around, it's like, oh, it's Harlan Ellison, and he's like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just I actually had a room, hotel room next to him at World Fantasy in New Orleans,
Hmm.
and I was a smoker then. I used to smoke cigarettes, and
Yeah.
I knew he hated smokers and
Yes, he did.
smoking like with a passion. And so I was like, I snuck out and I was like in the lobby, you know, and I was like, almost I lit up was, as they say in England, I puffed on a fag,
Hmm.
and
Sure. Sure.
and then all of a sudden I hear this, this like voice behind me, hey, I'm your neighbor. And I'm like, I look around, it's fucking Harlan Ellison, man. And
Yeah.
he's like, if you I'm gonna be typing, is that okay? And I'm gonna be making a racket with my typewriter. And it's like, if if you if it annoys you, just pound on my door. And I was awfully like, I usually try not to be sort of unctuous, I
Mm.
pride myself in not being, sort of folding, but it's Harlan fucking Ellison, right? And I was like, oh yeah, it's an honor, Mr. Ellison.
Of course you're going to say that.
Of
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
I'm
You're
going
going
to
to say
say
that.
that, right?
Of course you're going to say that. Yeah.
If he
Absolutely.
if he woke up, if he woke me up in the middle of the night and he's pounding, I'm like, he's probably writing, you know, um, you know, a boy and his dog. So, I'm not gonna pound on his door. You know what I
No.
mean? Like
Absolutely not. No.
William fucking Shakespeare of speculative fiction is writing some new classic. I'm not going to be the guy. Yeah, I'm with Coleridge. It was the man from, you know what I'm talking about, right? With the you know what I mean? The man from
It's Kubla Khan,
the
the way that
the
the
Kubla
fa-
Khan guy. Yeah.
yeah, the
Oh,
fact that the poem it's unfinished because he was interrupted. His
yes.
reverie, shall we say, was interrupted, and
Yes.
whoever interrupted Coleridge, we never got to get the rest of that poem. So
Right. And so
there you
I
go.
think it was like the man from Porforth or something, like, I forget,
Yeah,
is that it, right? And so ever afterwards, because he added that as a context to the fragment,
yeah.
right? In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a
Mhm.
stately pleasure dome decree where out the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. And I always think of the Jabberwock after that,
Oh yeah, sure,
right?
sure.
But people in literary history, like, fucking, you wouldn't want to be that guy because everybody hates you.
No. Oh
Everybody,
yeah, yeah.
everybody hates you. It's like, you denied us Kubla Khan. What the fuck, dude?
What the fuck? Yeah.
Anyway, so it's been a, a, a thing of beauty and a joy forever to be. I love the romantics.
Yes,
And
they
never,
they are underrated now,
they're
honestly.
they're underrated because they're 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 the music of the lyrics was so powerful, and people think the Beatles were good. Well, have you read Keats? Have you read Wordsworth? Have you read
Yay.
um, you know what I mean? Like, if you haven't, then you have a lot of, like, Wordsworth. I have, or Byron, my God, the Don Juan, or um shoot, um and they were all underrated in their time, and
Sure.
they were kind of what Keats was like, here lies one whose name is written in water, because he thought that he would be completely forgotten. And you know
Yeah.
he's the first name that you think of when you think of beautiful verse.
Well, if you've been told to, or you've been shown, or you've been allowed to see it, and a lot of people, and I mean the hoi polloi, to go back to that whole notion, the hoi
Yeah,
polloi,
yeah,
the general public, that isn't being shown to people. That's not being given to them as part of their heritage, if this part of their birthright. If you speak English, or you should be able to be allowed to read those things and understand those things. And I feel that's very important.
I do too, and I think a lot of racism is involved. A lot of people,
It is.
like
It is.
are is this considered like you're somehow that if you're Latino, if you're black or whatever, that you shouldn't have access to. I think it's the heritage of humanity,
It is.
and you should be able to, be encouraged to read Shakespeare,
Yeah.
Marlowe, Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, Virginia Woolf, and not just in graduate school by accident, but read Melville, for example. And the way
Sure.
that these authors are taught, it makes it just so like stultifying, and you have to take standardized tests. And if I had to
Yeah.
take those as a youngster, if I hadn't read Moby Dick, uh, just gorging on the beautiful language, and saying, "Hey, that's fucking gay as shit, man." Like Billy Martin said, that Moby Dick is one of the greatest queer horror novels ever written.
It absolutely is. It
It's
is.
just like, yeah, man. It's like when Ahab like he binds himself to the whale with a harpoon, you know, um, rope or whatever,
Yeah.
and Ishmael sails home on a coffin.
Yeah.
It's also kind of funny. It's a
It
really
is though.
funny book.
There is though, and Herman Melville is very funny in so many ways. You just have to take it in a certain way.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's what she wanted. But anyway, I digress.
Maybe.
Maybe not. So, okay, well, it's been a real pleasure catching
Yeah.
up with you, and I wish you well with all of your pursuits. And
Thank.
Bad Flowers
Yeah.
is there any kind of like drop date for Bad Flowers? Because I've been looking forward to that one.
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, I haven't. I mean, I do. I suppose I could put out some of the collections and some of the translations. I have done some recordings of it, and I've thought about putting that out. But you know, I have a lot of projects. I'm rather busy, but I need to get some stuff out. The my Oracles of Nostradamus is my second edition of that is out and it's available. You just have to look up Jacqueline Dilworth on Amazon, and you'll see the Oracles of Nostradamus, the selected oracles, and that's what that is. And I should get you a copy of that so
Yeah,
you can
yeah. I
look
mean,
at
I
that.
actually like the same, I think it was 2024. I got a postcard from you of
Yeah.
oracles, and I also got a postcard from Patrick Califia. So
Oh,
I was like, wow, So yeah,
no, yeah,
for
well, sure,
Christmas.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy. I wish I had more of a conversation with him, but also there's some other just kind of writing projects I need to finish. I need to finish my stories about Goldfield because they need to be done and they need to be
Hmm.
getting out there because
Yeah.
I turned Goldfield, Nevada into sort of a post-punk Edwardian cyber steampunk universe, and I have all sorts of weird stories about that because it's a weird place. It's where the West meets the past and the future in so many ways. So that's kind of that.
I would read the shit out of that. So yeah, I love like mixed genre stuff.
Sure.
Whether I wrote a book called Bad Sunset,
Mm,
began as a sort of a satire of Western movies to be
mm,
specific, and but it kind of mutated to this sort of a splatterpunk, steampunk uh,
mm,
ride. It's got metaphysical accents. It's got Jesus Christ as a
mm.
protagonist. It's also got a brujo who rides into town on an axolotl salamander,
Sure.
and it's got pretty much everything. But
Sounds
you know who has a copy of it? I mean, this is literally true. So my friend Emily Frank, the
Oh,
poet and publisher, right? Emily Frank is a wonderful person,
hmm,
and shout out to, you know, I actually get to meet her in person this year, but
that's cool.
she does Sacred Beverage Press, and she also does she's the webmistress for Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh,
So
yeah.
right. So I said, hey, what are the chances I want to send Billy my book, Bad Sunset? And she's like, well, just you know, write it, dedication or whatever, send it to me, just write him a letter and send it to
Hmm,
me. I'll hand deliver it. So she sent me this photo of all her mail and that she, collected for Billy. And it's like, and she said, here, this is Alex. This is his novel. And I was like, oh,
hmm,
wow, that's so badass.
hmm,
So
hmm.
he's doing Landman now. So I'm like,
Oh, sure, sure.
I hope that eventually he just having, in his whatever in his possession is enough for me. I don't need to.
Sure.
It's to me, it's just like, well, you know, candy makes good,
Maybe so. Also, I have my novel Star finally. I have it in manuscript form, and I haven't really published yet or done anything with it or submitted it anywhere.
Mhm.
It's the first novel completely that I finished, and it's
That's
about,
congratulations.
thank you, the backward history of Reno and Nevada, and sort of how gambling is and the afterlife is, and all kinds of stuff. It's very much a strange book.
I love the way you said that. It was sort of like how
Mm.
gambling is in the afterlife,
Yeah, and yeah,
and the after as though those two were, you know, like metaphysically kind of, you know, joined at the hip, right?
they absolutely are.
Gambling in the but they are kind of because,
They are.
if you get in trouble with gambling, you might be taken out,
Maybe
right?
so. Maybe
You know,
so.
or-
Maybe I should get that too. Well, but we'll figure it out. But those are what
yeah.
the writing projects I have, and my weekly radio shows are Dark Party and the Jackalope Hour. In fact, today I'm recording my 500th Jackalope Hour episode.
Congratulations.
So thank you. That's I've been doing that about 10 years, and I'm on what episode am I on of Dark Party? Just to check. Uh, 171 today. I have a band called Regal Nonchalant, and they're going to be in the studio live, and they're starting their tour with me. So if you want to
That's
hear a lot of that stuff, you can go to my website, and it's kind of a stopping place. It's darkparty.com, DARQUEPARTY.com. My Instagram is SEJDB, and you can hear the radio show tonight specifically, Dark Party Live at Pyrocat Radio, kpcr.org. And if you look up Dark Party, you can find it on most podcast depositories. I need to figure out how to get crack the YouTube one, because that always kind of gets me stymied. But
mhm.
and same with the Jackalope Hour, where you can hear that just about everywhere too,
That's
and
beautiful,
terrestrial and
beautiful.
online radio stations. Yeah.
Jackie, do you happen to recall like the last time I had you on my show, or
About, I want to say 2 years ago, but I
two
don't recall
years? Yeah,
exactly. It's about
yeah,
2 years. Sure.
yeah. It's amazing that we're still, we still got pickles, and
Sure.
still,
Hi, Aaliyah.
yeah, right. I mean,
Send her a
she's
line later too.
exactly, yeah, so totally. And I know you two have been messaging and writing to
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah,
Sure.
Pickles is really special, and
She's a good
so
gal.
yeah,
She-
she's wonderful. So okay, Dark, was it what would be a sort of a good luck input from a goth place, like a sort
Knock
of
'em dead.
knock 'em dead. I see what you did there. Um, Love and Slack is always safe, right?
Well, it is, but knock 'em dead too, because
Knock 'em dead, yeah.
you do that. All right.
Okay, take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.